On September 6, 2024, much of the gaming world witnessed the culmination of something absolutely spectacular. A sight that filled the entire landscape with awe, no matter how one felt about it. In many ways, the spectacle could be compared to a total solar eclipse, which actually occurred about 5 months earlier on April 8th, casting an impressive shadow across much of the North American continent. Much like that phenomenon, anybody with any interest in the subject could have seen it coming well in advance. And on the day it finally happened, we were just flat out awestruck for one of many different reasons. The difference between these two events are actually rather simple. One was the ring of fire across a darkened sky, while the other was the igniting of a massive dumpster fire. While it did have its defenders, many gamers, myself included, simply brought ourselves a portable lawn chair, a large bucket of popcorn, maybe some butter if one felt like having that, and simply looked around to sit and watch this dumpster fire burn, almost as if we were in the Black Rock Desert in Nevada attending that year's Burning Man festival. That dumpster fire was the effigy of Concord. I might be beating a dead horse with this video, but it's such a fascinating subject to me for so many reasons. And while I did make something while the game was active, it was a very quick shitpost at a time where I didn't have all my marbles backed up. Now that I've had some time to properly think about it, as well as more behind the scenes stuff coming into light, I wanted to come back to this subject and simply get the entire thing out of my system. This is simply my take on a game that, when the dust finally truly settles, will go down as one of, if not the single most complete and unmitigated disaster the gaming industry has ever seen. But before I start, consider subscribing if this video turns out to be worth your time. As a one-man operation, any support's appreciated, and I give my thanks in advance if you do so. Let's start with what we know based on reports before the game was released. The game reportedly started in 2016, before Firewalk Studios was a proper company. The studio itself would officially be founded in 2018, and Concord would ultimately take about 8 years to develop. Taking that much time to develop a game is a little bit egregious. Nowadays, the average time to develop a game is about 2 years. Half that for a rather short project, or if the group really knows what they're doing, sometimes 3, maybe 3.5 years for much larger projects. If a game goes any longer than 4 years, more often than not, something had to have gone wrong at some point. On April 22, 2021, Sony's PlayStation Studios announced a publishing partnership with Firewalk Studios, in addition to their parent company, Probably Monsters. Just shy of 2 years later, they would acquire Firewalk outright. Prior to Firewalk's acquisition, the game had just gotten into an alpha state after 6 to 7 years of development. Production had apparently been so troubled that Probably Monsters reportedly invested upwards of $200 million into Concord, and that was before Sony acquired the studio. Later on, when all this was said and done, a report of $400 million began to circulate, though this number has been contested. Those numbers are completely outrageous, especially as only a handful of the most expensive games ever developed have crossed even the $100 million mark. If that $400 million report is accurate, that easily puts Concord in the top 10. Slice the budget figure all you want, that doesn't really change the fact I'm about to say. This game had a 9-figure budget. A 9-figure budget on not just a debut IP, but a company's debut game. What the hell? A part of that might be attributed to the game likely being outsourced to other places for the next year and change, as it only took that long to get it from alpha to the final product. During its development, the president of Sony Interactive Entertainment, Herman Hulst, got a little too excited about this game. By little, I meant he went as far as saying that Concord was going to be the future of PlayStation, with Star Wars-like potential in it. Star Wars, huh? I'm gonna get back to that. This game was too big to fail, they thought. I think it's time to start dropping the dominoes. On May 30th, 2024, PlayStation released their State of Play, with Concord being right up front and center. For those that were already following the studio, they knew it was going to be a shooter of some kind. The trailer was okay, some of the characters were okay, the presentation was kinda cool, and the setting seems like it could be interesting. Maybe as an FPS-style adventure, that might work out pretty well. Third person might not be too big of a deal breaker. But regardless of that, you've got my curiosity.
Concord is a 5v5.
And just like that, almost all interest this game had imploded in an instant. A lot of others have already covered these points, so I'm going to be rather brief with them. The game was a hero shooter that released well after that genre's popularity had dwindled down. The gameplay itself was fairly solid. The problem was that it didn't stand out from all the others in an already oversaturated market. Thickening this brick wall is the fact that it cost you $40 just to play the game, at a time when all the others were going free to play. So already you have 3 major detriments going against the game. The game had a closed beta occur on July 12th to the 14th, while an open beta occurred from July 18th to the 21st. The result of that open beta was when things began to rear their ugly heads. The absolute max amount of players they had on that open beta was just under 2,400 on the first day it opened. You'd think the weekend would provide a pretty decent surge of players, but no, it kept declining with each day it was open. This is where another issue comes up. Apart from everything that was mentioned before the beta opened, all the players had access to all 16 free gunners, including some that looked like... Who
the fuck is this asshole?
I'm sorry. I feel like I'm looking at the bad box art Mega Man on the NES just looking at this character. A lot of these character designs are absolutely rancid, and some of them don't even tell what kind of character they're supposed to be in any way, shape, or form. It really says something when many say the best designed character of Concord is a literal fucking trash can. Now that's embarrassing, and it's about to get more so. Despite the very low player base in the open beta, the game was still getting released on August 23rd, and on that day, it was finally released to the public. Now, something personal I want to say, unlike most gamers whose first exposure to Concord is the event I'm about to cover shortly, my first exposure to Concord was when the game actually released. How that happened was a matter of me getting in touch with a group I first encountered in the middle of March, and looking at one of their social media pages, it revealed that, yeah, they had some copies of the PS5 version available. Of course, it didn't really matter much to me since I don't have a PS5, so I just looked at it like, okay, this exists. I also knew a dude who was actively playing the game, so when I wasn't doing anything, I sat back in one of the streams and watched him play a couple rounds. Because of all that, I had a bit more exposure to Concord than most. None of this was changing the fact that Herman Hulst's hubris was about to bite him in the ass, as this game would become a titanic flop. In just a week, the game sold a grand total of 25,000 copies, 10,000 coming from Steam, the rest on PS5. Speaking of Steam, that version couldn't even crack 700 concurrent players. Even the last day of the open beta managed over 1,100, and that player base just kept shrinking day after day. The site was just nuts. Not helping things were some of the development team being colossal assholes online, with one of the more scrutinized images being a developer calling critics talentless freaks. When I heard about the game tanking as hard as it did, I figured at absolute best the game had about a year before everybody called it quits, and at absolute worst maybe 3 to 4 months just so everything that was made got out of the way. Any expectations would be blown out of the water, as just past noon on September 3rd, after just 11 days of operation, it was announced that Concord was going offline on the 6th. When I heard of the shutdown announcement, I was absolutely floored. The game launched, tanked, and shut down within 2 weeks. I stopped everything I was doing that day and spent the next 3 hours making a 2-minute shitpost dedicated to dunking on this game. Looking back at it, I clearly didn't have all my marbles picked up. There was a platinum trophy for reaching level 100. During those final 3 days, everybody tried their absolute hardest to get that platinum trophy. Soon it was discovered that the easiest way to do it was to simply jump off the map. Cue a bunch of what little player base is left going full lemmings for the sole purpose of getting the platinum trophy. Just past 1 PM Eastern Time on September 6th, the Concord servers shut down. Anybody active at the time was kicked to the title screen. It's incredible to think about. This game had a 9-figure budget, lasted 8 years in development. All of that effort for a grand total of 14 days and 12.5 hours online. Words cannot describe just how much of a complete and unmitigated disaster this game truly was. To be fair, the writing on the wall for Concord was visible as soon as the State of Play announcement back on May 30th, and if it wasn't obvious then, it was very clear with the open beta. No one gave a fuck about this game. Absolutely no one. I mean that rather sincerely. You want me to prove my point? Alright, sure, I can do that. Let's be honest, you've likely been on the internet long enough to know what internet rule number 34 is. It is undoubtedly the single most well-known rule of the internet. When something makes its existence known, you can expect that kind of content within a matter of hours. For Concord, there was nothing. Nothing came from the State of Play trailer, nothing came from future trailers, nothing came from either beta, and nothing came when the game released. Somehow, someway, this game was inexplicably breaking the single most significant rule of the internet. Well, until about 3 days after release. But do you have any idea how hard it is to accomplish that? Concord was an impending dumpster fire from the word go, and it was finally lit when the servers shut down. That fire only got worse in the weeks ahead, as some of the more egregious reports of what happened behind the scenes started to come to light, such as the $400 million budget claim, as well as the outrageous overhyping from Sony. I mentioned earlier that Herman Hulst believed that Concord had Star Wars-like potential. Yeah, this game was the next Star Wars, alright? The Star Wars Holiday Special. Now, that might sound hilarious, but actually these two pieces of media dreck have much more in common than you might think. Sure, both of them are total dumpster fires for different reasons, but there's at least one good thing about both of them. For Concord, it's the gameplay, which was solid, even if it was unimpressive. For the Holiday Special, there was the Boba Fett cartoon. Both pieces of media were also effectively blips on the radar, as Concord lasted a mere 2 weeks before being completely shut down, while the holiday special aired exactly once and never was seen again. For both of them, the only record that they ever existed were those that recorded them when they were active. However, Concord had a chance to come back, as some people noticed the Steam version had updates occur over the course of several days. However, as the Concord effigy was reduced to ash and the dumpster fire started to wane, Firewalk Studio was also thrown into the dumpster fire on October 29th. The shutdown of Firewalk Studios not only means Concord was their only game, but any chances of it coming back were firmly squelched. Its legacy now permanently set in stone. One of the most complete and unmitigated disasters in gaming history. About a day or so after Firewalk shut down, the game would be enshrined in the Museum of Failure. It's definitely a hard blow for everybody involved. All I can do is hope everybody gets back on their feet and they're able to go somewhere else. As for Herman Hulst, the CEO who overhyped this thing beyond belief, well, last I heard from him, he was now required by federal law to carry a license to be as stupid as he is. If the gaming industry starts to crash in any way, shape, or form, you can look to Concord as a good catalyst for it. As for me, even though this subject is something I really shouldn't have any business with, even though it fascinates me to no end, all I can really say about Concord is rather simple. It is what it is. Hey everybody, Eclipse14 here, thanks for watching. I know this video isn't much, and some people could tell the story better than I could, but it's something that was just fascinating to me, and I wanted to get it out of my system before I focused on some more interesting topics. If you're interested in seeing my original shitpost, well, here you go. Other than that, if you liked what you saw, feel free to drop a like, and if you think my work is worth your time, please consider subscribing, I would greatly appreciate it. But in the meantime, I want to thank you for watching, and hopefully, I'll see you on my next video.